Thank you. So I'm Kristine, Olaris, and yes, we're going to talk today about our work with our regional partners to measure shared impacts, but largely in relation to this document, which is Together for Equality and Respect. So it's our regional strategies, you've just heard, to prevent violence against women over the next 4 years. Available on our website if anyone wants to have a bit more of a detailed look at it, which is just whe.org.au. Oh. Where's Sue? Have you changed the order?
Oh. Was this the one you sent?
No, that's just not the right version.
It's okay, because did you load the... Okay, great.
That one?
Yep, great.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So I'll keep talking.
Yeah.
So essentially the strategy, just to cover some key features, is being led by Women's Health East, but very much being developed in partnership with the range of our local organisations that I'll cover in a moment. But really bringing together partners from community health and local government and others that have really a lot of complementary things to contribute to the strategy. So, you know, complementary ranges of networks, connections to community, evaluation skills, so some really highly skilled people that we're being able to draw off there, and links to universities, and also doing, there's a lot of projects around preventing violence going on that we can kind of share and learn off each other from. And very much going down an integrated planning and evaluation approach, so clearly why we're speaking here today. So looking at developing an action plan that would sit under this strategy that would have some shared indicators for success. They're our partners, so we've managed to engage with all of the local governments, community health services, primary care partnerships and Medicare locals. Those four are probably the major partners in the strategy, because what we were really trying to do was to target those organisations that had a health focus. So the strategy itself has predominantly a health focus, but also those that were all going into a shared 4-year planning cycle so that we could really get some integrated work happening. But we've also very much engaged with the family violence and sexual assault sectors in our region and the organisations, because they're really helping us to keep on track to make sure that the work is very much linked to the needs of women who've experienced violence as well. So all of these organisations who say they're signatories to a regional commitment, that was at the launch of the strategy, which I've just been corrected was in May. I think I've written June in my presentation. We launched the strategy itself, but because some of them who were just seeing this for the first time, we had a sign-on ceremony which was just saying a commitment to work together over the next 4 years to prevent violence, and all of those organisations signed on, and we had people like mayors and CEOs and very high-level people from all of those organisations who came along and signed on to a very public statement of commitment, so that was fantastic. So just a little bit more background, I guess, and I'm going to hand over to Sue when we get to the where we're at now and the forward-moving stuff, because that's where she's kind of been really leading this work. But the background, I guess, was, you know, as I said, going in for the first time into a 4-year planning cycle. So all of the funding and planning cycles of local governments, community health organisations, women's health organisations and PCPs had been aligned for the very first time. And so the very purpose of which was to support and promote integrated planning. So we thought we should take advantage of that. We also had a lot of work going on in the region around the prevention of violence against women. So some programs that had already been happening and were finishing up, and that people were scared would be the learnings would be lost and not continued on. Some projects just beginning. And so there was certainly in the local government sector, the Inner East had just finished off a project, the Outer East was just starting one, and they were very much called a meeting really and said, invited us along and the PCPs along and said, how do we not lose what's already happened? How do we share the new work that we're going, and how do we learn off each other? So that was very much the impetus for getting this work happening. But also the community health centres had just lost a lot of money, health promotion funding, as had we, and so very much, which very much pushed us to think, how do we still do effective work with less money, but in a way that also shows that we're doing good work, because we don't want to lose funds again, and really also clearly realising that in order to make a difference in prevention of violence against women, we really had to be working together, because we know that one-off projects don't work, so that we needed to integrate our work. So after after the local governments called us together, we then came up with put to them this idea of a regional strategy, and met also with our other regional partners and talked to them about what would this be useful, and if it was useful, which they said it would be, how would we make it work for them in order for them to be able to prioritise the prevention of violence against women in their plans for the next 4 years. And so what they told us was that what they needed us to help them with was really developing a case for action. And so that was both around data, so local data, local indicators. It was also around evidence of consultation, and that the various agencies across the region were consulted and involved in the prioritising of this issue, and also, what evidence-based action would look like. So how would they move this forward? So for some people at very different levels, some people had done a lot of work in prevention of violence against women, some people had done very little, so were really looking for some support and guidance. So this is just some examples of some of the data that is in the strategy itself. So some of it we have chosen from a variety of sources. So a personal safety survey, which is getting quite old, but which is where the 1 in 3 women and 1 in 3 women having experienced physical assault and 1 in 5 sexual assault. So that's self-reported data. I think it's about being redone. So that will be very interesting to look at. But also just literature, and clearly police data, and there's a whole booklet of family violence data that we can draw from, that Department of Justice put together. So, presented in kind of formats that were easy for people to look at. So rates of reporting of family violence being one of the major kind of focuses, because that would be the main indicator that we would be looking in the long term to shift. Comparative data and the rates of reporting and how they've been increasing for each local government area. Rates of increase. The evidence base, so drawing heavily off Vic Health's work, where they've put a lot of work into developing up a bit of an evidence base for and a framework for how to address violence, and so very much drawing off that to give some guidance for our region. And then we also undertook so we started just with a SurveyMonkey online survey of 26 representatives from 26 organisations, where we, tried to get a bit of an idea of what people were currently doing, so that we could map and have a kind of, this is where we started from, idea of what people were doing in this priority area currently, what their needs were in terms of, what their confidence was around working that space and what their needs were in terms of that area, and also what sort of themes or actions they wanted to see in a strategy. And we got 100% response rate, which was fantastic, and really just showed again the commitment that we had from our partners. And I guess it highlighted that there was some good work going on, but there was also lots of gaps. It showed us that there was a real need for building of capacity in organisations as well. And that is just sort of showing you this was kind of one of the questions around what areas they most wanted to work in. And so you can see organisational workforce development, direct participation programs, and communications and social marketing were the top 3 kind of areas they'd like to see work on into the future. And so the next step, I guess, was, the next step was taking all of that information back again to our partners, and we had another forum where everyone came along and we presented all of that back. So the evidence we'd found, the data, the consultation findings, and the evidence base to this work, and we workshopped basically this bit of the strategy, which was really coming to agreement around a vision, a purpose, and also the 4 pillars that you can see up on the screen, which really then became our pillars for action. So that we were to develop some common objectives, common indicators, evaluation plans around those 4 areas. So I think that was kind of really the point where we were then able to complete the document and get it out, launch it. And I think we're very pleased to then be able to find after that every one of our partners of the local government's community health services, PCPs and Medicare locals have put prevention of violence against women in their plans, so either their municipal health plans, their safety plans, or their health promotion plans. So that's a fantastic place to go forward in an integrated planning way to have at least got to that point where we've all got it on our plans. Something we did at the same time, not a part of the strategy but very much sitting beside the strategy, was we got the latest census data and the CIV indicators and some social and health issues, and we basically presented to each of our partners a package of information about their local area, which gave them up-to-date sex disaggregated and gendered information for them to be able to use in their development of their plans. And I think, although as I said it's not part of the strategy, if at the end of 4 years of this strategy we don't have to do that in 4 years' time, that each of our partners are planning in a gendered way, that will make enormous steps forwards towards achieving gender equality, which is really, as we said, one of the causes of violence against women. So this would be, anyway, it was, we haven't completely measured yet. We're planning to how many people use this, but we've certainly seen quite good evidence of it and got lots of feedback about that. And I have one person in the audience who's thanked me for that in the break. So, and so this was the next steps that we outlined in the strategy for where to go next in terms of integrated planning. We did hold another forum after launching the strategy to go, okay, this is what you all agreed to. Let's talk about what this really means and how we actually go forward, the level of commitment and work that's needing to go into place in order to come up with some common objectives, a common evaluation plan, common indicators, so that we can actually assess in 4 years' time whether this regional approach made a difference. This is I'm going to hand over to Sue. So Sue was employed as the project manager for this work and is also our health promotion coordinator, and she's been leading this bit of work, so I'm going to hand over.
So that's when I started. So at the starting of the action plan phase. So we've had a bit of a look to date as to how we've used the data to bring people together and to work towards shared commitment in a range of different plans that were being put in at the time. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're heading and trying to work together about getting shared indicators and then being able to share data later on to give us a picture of what's happening regionally and for people to then be able to use that information at their local and organisational level, drawing on the work that's happening in the region. So an agreement was made at the forum that we were going to sort of follow this model to work through to develop some indicators and shared objectives across the region, building on the work that's already happening. So as Emily said earlier today, actions don't wait for the timelines of the plan. So there's a lot of work already happening that's bridging the timelines of the planning process. And so we wanted to make sure that we could capture that and use the accumulated wisdom that people had in that work to inform some of the directions for the next stage of the plan. So there was an agreement for people to complete a mapping table that sounds familiar, generated an enormous amount of data across the region on current and planned initiatives in the prevention of violence against women, activities that organisations are either already undertaking or intending to in the next at least year or couple of years. And so the table was completed, then organisations had a one-to-one with our colleague at Women's Health East, Jill Exton, who went through that information in a little bit more detail. As Kristine said before, we're trying to maintain a primary prevention focus. So the first sweep was to get a sense of where the work was in primary prevention, what work was happening in secondary prevention and tertiary and response sector. And so the first focus that we're going to have on developing indicators will be around some things that relate to the work people are doing in primary prevention. And we'll certainly be looking at the second sweep about what we can do about developing shared indicators about other work as well, but wanting to maintain in the first instance focus on primary prevention. So the process was a process called intervention mapping. So it's kind of working backwards from the interventions to generate the shared themes, and from that develop shared objectives. And so we work then to identify areas in common across the themes that people of the activities that people had identified, and then did some consultation around these themes in order to generate some shared objectives. And from that we will be developing indicators that will be regional level indicators and also ones that can be adapted for the local level. So this is the first piece of the shared work, and so we developed a mapping table that, as I said before, was an inventory of the current and future work in the prevention of violence against women. And so organisations completed this mapping table and submitted that, and Jill could tell me how many pages of Excel it was, and I imagine it's similar, so Emily would know what that feels like. We divided up, Kristine before referred to the fact that we were using the Vic Health framework, so we looked at the 7 action areas in the Vic Health framework and asked people to identify the work that was how they classified it according to the action areas, that's the framework that's informing our strategy. But we also wanted to reference, of course, our strategic directions that the partners identified in the process of developing the strategy. And so we mapped the Vic Health framework initiatives against the strategic directions that have been identified in our strategy, just so that we will be able to get indicators that we can pin and relate to the strategic directions. So at the conclusion we can say, under this heading of lead and achieve change, these are the initiatives that took place, these are the evaluation findings and the results that we've had from these, and so this is what we can now say in terms of what's the difference we've made in the sphere of leading and achieving change, what's the difference we've made in being able to contribute to the evidence base and for the others as well. So we want to be able to clearly report back and use this work to report back on the degree to which we've met our strategic directions and what that tells us for what we need to do next, of course, always. So I'm just using an example here from the organisational workforce development, because as Kristine said earlier, that was one of the key areas that people had in common around indicators of either current or planned work. So 15 of the partner organisations identified 18 primary prevention initiatives in relation to organisational workforce development, and 3 themes in that work then emerged. So we had a smaller working group of representatives across the partnership, including, as Kristine said, drawing from some evaluation resource that we've got within the partnership and those skills to lead that process, taking us through the intervention mapping approach. And so we looked at gender equity training, organisational system development for the strategy partners, and organisational system development for where strategy partners are intending to have influence on organisations that are not their own. So that seemed to be the 3 kind of key areas of shared work, lots of overlap. Oh, that much? Slow down. No. Lots of questions maybe. So for an example, in relation to workforce development, that at a regional level, these are still being drafted and finalised amongst our partners. But at a regional level, we want to be able to say the number of strategy partners that in their own organisations have been able to have identified enablers and barriers to a gender equitable workplace. And then an example of how that then can be used by the organisation themselves to put in their plan, that they can say, this is what we will have done by this time. And so that then we'll be able to aggregate that up. So we're going to then identify shared tools and data collection methods for people to use to measure that where they're doing shared pieces of work. And so that then we'll be able to aggregate that up and look at give us then the information for what will be happening at the regional level. So the process is derived from the activities that are already underway. It then will present a range of regional level objectives supported by a number of different more local level objectives that people won't need to be identifying all of those local level objectives, but may well be one or two that represent where each individual organisation is up to in their journey. So, for example, with organisational workforce development, for some organisations it will be about developing a strategy or a statement or an action commitment around the prevention of violence against women, or doing some work about a gender equitable workplace. And that will be that's where they're at in the journey. For others, they might be at the point of identifying the enablers and barriers to that. So, but all of those then will be able to contribute to the number of organisations across the region that have made a shift in organisational development in relation to gender equity is the particular focus. So that's where we're heading. And so, as Adam also said before, and indicated in the work that's happening at ANECTCO, that we're wanting to very much find the indicators and work with indicators that fit the direction and not be dropped out, by indicators. And so the next piece of work is identifying these tools and resources that we're going to use. And so clearly, we've already identified earlier how the crimes against persons and perceptions of safety have been of interest in the developing interest in making the case and is in the background. And we'll be looking at a range of different existing tools and supporting resources in the first instance. And certainly in the City of Monash, there's a lot of work that's going on already. No? It's coming soon. Okay. No. Keep talking. Yeah. And so many of our partners are at different stages, and City of Monash has certainly been doing a lot of work in organisational development at the City of Monash with an existing funded project. And so one of the opportunities that gives us working at this regional level is to draw on the tools and resources that have been developed there for use there more broadly across the region, and so that we'll be able to be looking at the same sorts of things. And that we can then make the most of the learnings from that experience, and maybe that tool might be a little bit more detailed, but at least we can look at some of the be comparing similar things and be able to then present at a region how we've got a more integrated approach and be able to demonstrate the benefits of that. So it's pretty exciting, and obviously there's still a lot more work to be done, and there are some challenges, of course, in identifying and relevant indicators and existing data, and getting a shared sense of how we're interpreting what that means and bringing people together. And certainly that's something that we're looking in the action plan for the strategy more broadly, is the role of bringing people together and generating that common understanding, and again using drawing on the expertise of people who've already been doing a bit of that work and tapping into that. And we hope that the benefit for those organisations, as well as altruistic and contributing to the greater common good, is that for them that will also provide some comparative data. So if we're all looking at similar sorts of things, we'll be able to look for, even where the projects are perhaps most developed and already in place, at least what the benefit for them might be, that as other organisations come on and do some work, that we can say, well, this is what happened with this amount of resource and this degree of intensity in doing things this way. This is what happened in other areas, and we'll be able to share those stories and all learn from that. So getting support and agreement around the shared approaches, and I think that Kristine talked before about some of the mechanisms that were used in the initial stages, and certainly that sense, and there is a lot of goodwill, and it's terrific that sense about there is a big commitment to the fact that we can achieve a lot more together and in combination than each individual organisation can achieve on their own. Keeping people engaged, and I think we're at a particular point now when we've had the really exciting part of the strategy and the launch, and but keeping people engaged, and I certainly think the commitment to identifying shared indicators and data collection methods and tools will be one of the very significant ways that we can keep people engaged, and through the understanding and through the real benefit that people will have and derive from being able to do that, and efficiencies and effectiveness that will happen from that. Clearly there's some differences in drivers and reporting mechanisms, so the level of detail and the expectations around what people need to report and to whom is a very strong driver, and so where there are differences across that, the degree to which people want to commit to similar sort of measurement and use of indicators varies, and so we'll need to look at being able to work within that sort of framework. And as we know with partnership work, there are a range of different things that are as a priority for people that are on the demanding attention, and that environment is quite dynamic. And so having the regional strategy is a way of, and us taking a sort of a focus on being able to keep people focused and supporting people with resources is something that we can do to help maintain the commitment to working in the partnership. Communication across a range of organisations and a range of different platforms is challenging, but there's a number of, we've got a communication plan that sits under the strategy that we're working on, and certainly around sharing the stories as they arise will be one of the key mechanisms by which we keep people engaged. And certainly there's different capacity to engage in the prevention of violence against women. It is a major priority of focus for our work, but me particularly have to keep in mind that everyone else is maybe juggling a few more things than that, and so that it isn't always at the front of everyone's mind about we need that objective by next week so people can comment on it, and other people do have other things absolutely that are important and that we respect. So that is now, that's just contact details for us. That's what we've got to say.